Hi, this is Kendra from Pencil and Pigment, and today I wanted to do another huge tutorial video, and this time I am going to be focusing on beginning Fineliner pen and ink for drawing and illustration. Now, because this is going to be a larger video, I will include timestamps in the description box, so you can sort of move around to what is more relevant to you in case you're familiar with some of this, or you already know a large portion. This can just speed up and save you some time. So let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about is surfaces, because that can be a huge make or break deal when it comes to drawing and creating and getting started with Fineliner pens. Now, I'm not going to be covering fountain pens or dip pens or drawing ink. That is a completely different thing, and I could dedicate hours to that type of video. So I'm just going to keep it Fineliner and maybe some felt tip, some ballpoint, and then the paper for it. As always, I am going to stick to, for beginning, the largest, most common used surface for pen and ink, and that's paper. And I'm going to list a few with the pros and cons of each one and some things to think about along the way as you contemplate these options and sort of your goals for what you're drawing for. So maybe this is a hobby, or this is just sort of a one-off, or for gifts. Maybe it's a side hustle or a job, or you want to make this a full-time career. The first thing I want to say is there's really no right or wrong, just preference depending on goods, like on what you're interested in and your goals. So I am in the United States and we use the imperial system for measuring weight. But when it comes to paper, please switch over to the metric system, which is GSM, grams per square meter. It's much more accurate. And in the beginning, this will help you sort of point you in the direction you might be interested in going with your drawing. Now, I word it that way specifically because with paper, there are other things to know, like coding and sometimes sizing. And when I say sizing, I'm not talking about the size of the paper, but sizing that is a liquid used in the paper for like watercolor paper to alter the absorbent qualities. So if you are curious about watercolor paper, there's more about that in the Everything Beginning Watercolor tutorial video. So because of this, thick paper doesn't mean the best or the favorite. What is best is what's preference for those who draw with pen and ink. So I want to sort of introduce some terminology that will help you as you go through to show you some different paper ideas and alternatives for pen and ink surfaces. So please, like with anything with this, just keep in mind that these are basic guidelines. There's no hard and fast rules. It's art. You learn the rules so you can then break them. Again, what I prefer may not be what you prefer. You kind of have to move around in the space you're in. You might have to go to the store and like touch texture, touch paper, feel thickness, understand what 65 GSM thickness feels like versus 165 GSM, and then try some of that. Sometimes companies will sell paper sample packets, and I will try and link some of those if I can find some, and then you can really try a wider variety and see what you feel comfortable with. You can literally draw on anything. Anything can be drawn on any type of paper. So you can start with junk mail, return address envelopes, the backs of paper mailers, anything. Just practice on everything, and that will sort of get you started, especially if you are on a tight budget or a limited income, or you're just getting a feel for it as just something fun to try. To describe specific terminology, I am going to use an illustration as example, and that will help you visualize it a little bit better. So the first term I want to introduce you to is called bleeding or bleed through. And this is when the ink soaks through the paper over to the other side of the page. And this can vary based on ink or the paper. So some inks tend to bleed through more, and some paper tends to have more bleed through. If it's the paper, it's because it's too absorbent. So right here you can see the ink has bled through the page. Let me zoom in. All right, here it is up close. The ink has bled through the page and you can see it. Now, ghosting, this is when you can clearly see what's on the other side of the page without the ink coming through the page. And sometimes this is referred to as show through or echo, but in this video, I'm going to call it ghosting. So you can clearly see, here is the arc of the ear, the inner ear, and here is the top portion of the hair. Here's the eye. This is called ghosting. This is the illustration. Here is the back side of it with the bleeding and the ghosting. The last term I want to introduce you to is something referred to as feathering. And that is when the ink soaks up into the paper, resulting in sort of a veiny pattern that branches out from the line drawn. And this is kind of more common with fountain pen ink, and sometimes it's referred to as spread. For this video, I'm using the term feathering. I will link articles in the description box that contain tons more terms if you're interested in fountain pens and all the terms associated with that. So when you draw and you have a crisp, fine line, there is no feathering, which means the line stayed where I laid it down. It didn't bleed or branch out. There's no feathering. So those are the terms I'm going to be using when I talk about the paper for fine liner drawing. Other considerations when it comes to paper is style. Do you prefer plain? Do you like dot grid? Do you like graph? Do you like lined? Sometimes our budgets don't afford us a choice, but if it does, those are some things to consider. Do you prefer white paper? Do you like ivory? Do you like cream? There are subtle differences there in between. There is also surface, how smooth a surface is, and that has to do with the coating. And I'm going to explain the pros and cons of that. So if something is super smooth, chances are it has some form of coating or texture. If it's not, if it has a little texture, sometimes they'll say it has a tooth to it. So what you need to know is that the coating or the sizing affects the texture, and fully coated paper is so smooth, it's almost slippery. So the pros to this would be there's no bleeding, there's low to no ghosting. The cons are this takes a lot longer for the ink time to dry. So you run the risk of smudging or smearing it as you're continually creating. Uncoated paper has more texture, and the pros to that could be it sucks up more ink. There's a quicker drying time. The con would be bleeding, and ghosting could be possible. So as you practice, as you learn, as you read through and figure out what you want your goals to be like and what you want to do, you'll hone in on what you prefer more of. And a lot of times it could just be price per quantity of paper received that is sort of the deciding factor for that. So I'm going to show you sizes visually to help explain that. So for paper sizing, many times when you go to purchase paper, drawing paper, it can come loose leaf, pad, sketchbook. There will be sizes. Now, I am in the United States, so a lot of what is offered to me is in standard imperial sizing. So I will get pads of paper that are the US standard sheet size, which is 8.5 by 11 inches. That is what this size of the white paper is. Or it'll come 9 by 12 inches, 11 by 14, 16 by 20, 24 by 36. These are also the US standard picture framing sizes. So our sheets come already sort of cut to our standard picture frame sizes, which is kind of unique. Now, one of the more common are different letters. So you'll see something like A6, B6, F3. Those are something completely different. So the most popular, and I do have an entire dedicated video to paper sizes, but the most popular you'll see offered are the A sizes. And the one right here, this pink one, this is an A4, and it's 8 1/4 by 11 3/4 inches, or 210 by 297 millimeters. So this is the size of an A4. And as the number next to the letter gets smaller, the paper gets bigger. So if I say A5, A5 is half of an A4. And A6 is half of an A5. Okay? A6, A5, A4, and then you can imagine an A3 is 2 of these. It's huge. So an A5 measures 5 7/8 by 8 1/4, because the 8 1/4 shares the same width as the A4. And this is 148 by 210 millimeters. And A6 measures 4 1/8 by 5 7/8, because it shares the same width right here as an A5, or 105 by 148 millimeters. So visually you can see what A's look like. An A6 is roughly the palm of my hand. I can fit a couple hands on an A5, and an A4 is about 4 hands. So that is it for the majority of sketchbook and sketchpad paper sizes that are the most common. Now, because of where I'm at in my art journey, I don't have a lot of beginning, sort of entry-level budget student price sketchbooks. What I have now are a little bit higher grade, a little bit higher quality, and a little bit higher price sketchbooks, because that's just where I'm at. So I'm going to kind of show you some of the unique sketchbooks I own, and if that later becomes sort of a goal or something you might be interested in, maybe you're interested in bypassing sort of newsprint, Strathmore drawing paper, some of the more budget student-friendly stuff. It just depends on where you're at and what you prefer. So let's get to the first one. The first paper I want to show you is called Tomoe River paper. Now this is paper from my planner, but this can be purchased in multiple formats, sizes, styles, colors. So this is 52 GSM. As you can see, it's very, very thin. You can see things through it. I will just draw a little heart here. This is a purple micron. It's thin, but it's very low ghosting. So this paper is special for a specific reason. It is double coated. This paper is available in 68 GSM. You can get this in notebooks, loose leaf paper, planners. It comes in white. This is the cream colored, and I will show you something white to compare it to. Let me get just a sheet of paper. You can see how cream that is. Okay. Now, if you're looking for this wide variety of option, Jet Pens in the United States has a really good layout of different options if you just search Tomoe River. And it comes in A's and B's. It's very, very popular with many different types of inks and different types of artists creating, because of the double coating and how thin it is and how much you can get in a planner because of the thickness. So I have a planner tour, but I've done a lot of wet media. Some wet media ghost through, some did not, but I've tried multiple things, multiple washes, with varying amounts of success. This is just very loose leaf drawing ink, and you can see it's starting to bleed. Lots of heavy, heavy ghosting. but there's zero feathering. So when I lay a line down, the line doesn't then start to vein out and spread because of the coating. Again, this is one of the smoothest papers I've ever used because of the coating. So drying time, plan ahead. It takes 2 to 3 times longer than you would imagine. Okay, the next paper I want to talk about, this is the Midori MD paper. It's around 80 GSM. And this comes bound in books. It comes plain, lined, dot gridded, regular grid, and it comes in A's, B's, and F's. I love this paper. This is some of my favorite paper. The front cover is kind of a blank cardboard. I bought a plastic cover for it. Now I'm going to show you what the other side looks like. This is Micron in hunter green and Micron blue black. You can see ghosting. I don't mind that. I kind of only use one side of the page. I find that if there's ghosting on one side, if I go to draw, the ink overlapping where it's ghosting, sometimes I'll have bleed through with double illustration on the same size, the same part, the same portion. So I only just do the one side, but I really, really love this Midori paper. It does have a very, very, very faint texture. I can't describe it. You kind of need to touch it. It's soft. That's how I describe this paper. And again, this is more on the ivory side. Here's white paper. All right, I want to show you this one. This is a Traveler's Blank MD paper, white. And you know it's Traveler's because they mark all their stuff. The first page of Travelers is the ivory. This is the Midori paper I just showed you in its own book. But as you can see, this is very, very white paper within the book. I'll show you the last page. It has more information. Again, the last page is also the Midori. Inside is white. Let's do a little drawing here. And as you can see, this one's spiral, this one's copper. Sometimes the spiral is silver. It's a variety. I don't own too many spiral sketchbooks. This is one I do own. Again, I'm using a Micron in purple. And just some faint ghosting right there. This paper comes also in craft paper if you really enjoy brown. It's size A's, B's. And I'm not quite sure the weight. They don't really list it. It's pretty thin, but it's, again, a very, very soft page. And it's just a beautiful paper to work with that I enjoy. So I thought I would share that with you. One thing I want to talk about when purchasing paper is if you have an abundance of watercolor paper at home, you have drawing paper. Now keep in mind, cold press has texture, hot press is smooth. Depending on the level of details you get, you may want something smoother or not. The bonus of using watercolor paper to draw on is that if you then decide you want to watercolor on it and add color, that option is now available to you. Now I have two different moleskin. These are both black. One is hardbound, one is softbound. And I want to talk about them because they're both vastly, vastly different. So this top one is 70 gram. It's 400 pages, 200 sheets. And moleskin makes every size, style, color, paperweight. But this bottom one is the Moleskin Art Sketchbook, and this is 165 GSM. So let's look at the difference of the paper. So I have the thin paper on top, the thick paper on bottom, and this thick one, I've already done some paper tests to show people that you can use wet media in the 165 GSM, but I'm going to do some hearts because I want to show you. So here's a purple heart. Here's a purple heart. Okay? And then when we flip the page, ghosting, and it's actually starting to bleed a little bit. And this one, I don't think you can see it at all. There's zero ghosting, zero bleeding. So this is 70-gram paper, but as you can see, it doesn't behave the same as some of the thinner papers I've been showing you, which is unfortunate. So keep in mind that size of paper, thickness of paper doesn't always indicate quality. This is where reading reviews, checking blogs, checking YouTube channel videos, checking Instagram write-ups, anything you can find, checking reviews on Amazon, Blick, JetPens, anywhere they sell stationery or art supplies, checking the reviews on the web pages. Sometimes those are cleaned up a little bit, but regardless, it's very, very important to read the reviews. When I am reading paper reviews, I am very cognizant of the 5-star and the 1-star, because a lot of 5-star reviews read like, oh, it arrived, it's in perfect condition, I love it so much. Tells me nothing about the paper, versus a 1-star that could say, oh, it arrived bent and broken, I'm super disappointed, and 1-star. Again, doesn't tell me anything about the paper. So sometimes I will lean into the 3rd-star ratings, sort of the middle of the road rating when it comes to paper. And that's where you get people writing, I like it, the pros, for this pen, this ink, this pen. However, I use this pen more, and there's ghosting, there's bleeding, and there's feathering. That is why I taught you those terms, so when you go to sort of pick out paper and read those reviews, it'll be very, very helpful where you want to spend the time and your money on what paper you want to bring into your art journey and your life. All right, let's talk about pens. The second most important thing that you will need, arguably the first, for creating and drawing with pen and ink. So for this one, I want to show you the sort of anatomy of a ballpoint pen, and I'm using the orange one because this part comes out. So what we have, and sometimes this portion right here is detachable from the pen. This is called the tip. This is the grip. Right here is the barrel. This is the clip. This is the spring that helps it with action. This is sort of the thrust device in here that you use. This is the ballpoint tip right here. This is the ink chamber. So as you can see, not a huge fan of using the orange. And then I'm just going to put it back together. Some pens you can take apart in this fashion, some you cannot. Like here is a gel pen. No part of this comes apart, but you can see the ink chamber inside because of this clear barrel and the tip and the ballpoint, and here's the tip, and here's sort of the end cap and the cap with the clip. Okay, these are the parts of a pen. As you can see, I have a wide variety of pens and fineliners. Again, I'm not sure if all these are still available, but I will sort of go through them if you are interested. Let's get started. So a fineliner is a pen with plastic or fine fiber needle point tips that are generally water-based ink. Sometimes they're oil-based, and the tips come in a various thicknesses that are relatively thin, hence the name fineliner, and they can range from 0.005 to like 1 millimeter. So check the sizing, and I'm going to explain and show you what sizing looks like. All right, keep in mind that some of my nibs have seen better days. I am going to use the micron as an example. Here's a 005. Can you see that tip? 005 is very thin. It's very thin, it's very fine. Here is an 01. And I might be out of ink here. All right, there's an 01. Here's an 02. As the number gets bigger, so should the line. Again, some of these pens, I apologize. I use my art supplies, so as a result, some of them have seen better days. Here's an 05. And that was brown, that was sepia. Here is an 08. It's very stark contrast. You can see the difference. Here is a graphic 1. You can clearly see the nib on that one. So, as the numbers get bigger, so does your line, so does the nib, the tip of the Fineliner, okay? A brief history of pens because it's absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to throw up pictures as I talk about this. Ancient Egyptians are credited with the first pen, and it was made from a reed or bamboo or plant stem. And these were used to create hieroglyphics on clay tablets. And it's sort of just the earliest form. The Egyptians were also credited with creating pen ink, and it was made from water, soot, vegetable extract, or boiled donkey skin. Yeah, no joke. Quills became popular in 600 AD, and then a Romanian inventor named Petrec Panaro invented the fountain pen in 1827. So pens have been around for a while, and there's such a wide variety that have come out. In 1892, Parker Pen Company released their first pen, the Lucky Curve. I will find a little tiny newsprint to throw up there. There's so many beautiful different styles of pens that have come along throughout the years. Papermate started in 1941. It's just such a long, rich history, and it's longer than we think. I don't have a Bic crystal, but that came out in 1950. In 1982, the Zebra pen, and I'm showing you a Sarasa because that is part of the Zebra pen line, was created in New York as a branch of the Zebra company. Gel pens came out in 1984 in Japan, and these are water-based. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that because I find it absolutely fascinating. Factors that influence purchasing. So there are some factors you may want to consider before you decide to run out and purchase all the different types of pens for Fineliner illustration. Archival. Is it acid-free? Is it something long-lasting? This is eco-pigment. How is it? Where is it made? Is it good for the environment? Things that are waterproof versus things that aren't. So I find with the Le Pen by Marvy, if water touches it or moisture, it still smears. Whereas things like Micron are much more they're not water soluble. They don't break apart. So consider what your budget is, consider what's available to you, consider the type of nib you want. Do you need it archival? Do you want it waterproof? Are you going to dip your toe into mixed media or adding different things like that? These are all things to consider. What is their color range and their availability to me? Can I only purchase this in a set? Can I buy one-offs? If there's one color, I go through more. These are just all considerations to take into account. Okay. One of my favorite questions is, what is your favorite pen? I don't have a favorite, I have preferences. So, for example, I've used Micron since probably 1992, I would say at the earliest, 93. I know how much ink is in one of these. These hold a lot of ink if you're gentle with the tips, and they last a long time. These are very, very reliable for drawing, for writing, and they're waterproof, they're archival. I know I can get different sizes, I can get different colors, I can buy them individually. This is probably why it's one of my favorites. Again, that's a preference to me. I like the shade range better in the Copic Multi-Liner, but I don't think it's as smooth. The little tip is a little bit rougher for some reason. It's just a little bit of a different drawing and illustrating experience. Again, it could be negligible to you depending on how often and how much you draw. So for handling, I prefer Micron. For colors, I really like the Copic Multi-Liner. Pilot is just fun because I know in a pinch I can get them at our grocery store. These are not light fast. What is light fast? It means if I draw with this and I hang it up near a window, the ink is going to fade over time. Now there are things you can do to protect for light fastness. You can put your illustration behind glass. You can scan it and upload it to a place like Redbubble or Society6. You could create accounts and you can then have the illustrations put on products that are light fast, like prints, notebooks, clothing, t-shirts, whatever you want. I think they have bath mats or something. There's so many things you can do. You can do print reproduction products. Basically turn them into a print that is then light fast. I just like how smooth they are, how reliable they are. It's just a very nice drawing, writing experience. I write with a lot of Micron. Yeah, big fan. Jelly roll. I went through a jelly roll phase in the late 90s. Not so much anymore. The jelly roll I prefer is actually the white ink. I really enjoy the white ink. I can use this on top of watercolors of other illustrations, and I know that this white ink is not going to yellow or change color over time, and that is very important. And this is very, very budget friendly, and it comes in multiple sizes. I have a 10, I have an 08, and an 05. Some of these were gifts. I have no preference. As you can see, this is black, but it comes out almost gray. So I would say the vibrancy on the Fineliner graphics are a little unique versus grabbing, like, let's see, a black Micron and knowing that's going to be a different shade of black. It's a darker black than that one. So again, I would say read reviews, look at blog, see what your favorite illustrators use. Sometimes they write, oh, here's a good Micron that has plenty of ink. You can see the difference in blacks. So I literally never use this. The other one I never use is the Faber-Castell Eco Pigment. Again, I just have a bunch of things that were gifts. And the nib on this one is a little bit, it feels different. It doesn't feel scratchy per se, but it just feels different. Again, I draw every day for about 2 to 3 hours a day, so everything feels completely different to me. I can very much see the differences. This is the Uniball Signo in silver. I really like their silver. I really like their gold. They're very, very reliable. There is a sheen. Can you see that? So as far as silver for illustration, silver and gold, I like the Uniball Signo. Again, some people prefer Posca. Some people prefer the Deco color. Again, what's best is what preference. This is a paint pen. There is paint in here. It's a little different. You can hear the ball. This is the 0.7. This is the smallest. It's the pin type. And it's the smallest one that they make. Right here, pin type. In case you're looking for a Posca that you can use sort of as a mock Fineliner. All right, so get out your sketchbook. We are now going to start illustrating, and I'm going to show you some different Fineliner techniques for drawing, for creating, for shading. For this illustration, I'm going to be using a Micron 08 because I know this nib is good and there's a lot of ink. So, old reliable. All right, let's get started with techniques. The first one I want you to learn is called hatching. Okay, and this is sort of just the bare basic. And the lines go in the same direction and they don't cross over. So here are your lines. Grab a sketchbook, practice with me, please. Things you can do to enhance your hatching is vary the line width. You can start thin and then press down a little bit or turn the pen to the side. It can get thicker. They can start close together and get farther apart. This is hatching, and this is how you can create shadow, you can create shape. Anything you want to create, you can create with hatching. The lines do not cross each other. They all go in the same direction. You can include different lines if you want to, if you're denoting a shape, but this is all still hatching, okay? The next one I want to introduce you to is called cross hatching. And this is where the lines cross. So again, start with hatching. They can cross. Remember, your lines can be different thicknesses. And then coming across can be different thicknesses. You can vary the line weight. You can also vary how close and how far apart these things become. Okay? Start close together and come farther apart. You can also have a third direction. And keep going with that. So it's really good for shadows, for textures, for layering. It's a denser shading technique, cross hatching. And you can draw entire shapes with cross hatching if you want to. Here's a little heart. It's whatever you want to create. I did an entire sketchbook with cross hatching of aquatic animals. I will link that in the description box. All right, the next technique I want to teach you is contour drawing. And this is sort of where the lines help create the shape. So they follow the curve of an object, and sometimes there's imperfections and all kinds of different things. So for example, following the curve of, if you have a ball, the contour follows the curve of the ball. Now, placing these contour lines at different widths, and then they get closer together, can also help denote the shape and contour the shape. It goes around. So, if you have a ball and some of the lines starts closer and then they get farther and then they get closer together, you can contour in a cross-hatching manner. We're closer to the top, they're closer together, and then they get farther apart, and then towards the bottom, they're going to get closer together again. You've contoured the shape of this ball, and it now looks three-dimensional, looks more realistic, looks like it's coming towards you. This can be sort of a more visually interesting sort of drawing technique. It can be a little bit more difficult. Again, with all of these, practice, practice, practice. Practice equals progress. It equals just making the best sort of drawings and illustrations you can make. Again, you can have fixed points for your contour. To sort of denote the roundness of this shape. And this is very, very beginning drawing basics. This one right here would be considered cross contour for your references, okay? And this again can help create shadow, space, and volume, shape. One of my favorites and one of the more time consuming is the stippling drawing technique, and this is dots. They can be big dots, they can be tiny dots, they can be dots of various sizes together. The closer you put them together, the more dense it becomes. Here I am stippling a heart. They can be overlapping, none of them can touch. If you've ever looked at a comic book really up close, a lot of comic books are printed in a stippling ink fashion. Again, you can start really close to denote dark shape, and as you branch out, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. This is a lot of fun, but it does take a larger amount of time when creating something bigger using stipple. So allocate for that time. Again, be real cognizant of how you hold your pen. You want to avoid, you know, hand cramps as much as possible. I know, it's tough, but just keep that in mind as you're creating with some of these styles, to take care of your hands so they can take care of you and your art. Okay. Circular is another drawing style that is a lot of fun, and it's just circles. Phone cords in the 1980s, lots of circles, and it can start dense and get lighter. It can start really tight, and the circles can get bigger. There's so many different ways to do this style. Your circles can be more oval, ovoid. And again, for shape, for shadow. This is a lot of fun. All right, random lines. Everybody loves a free-for-all. Continuous line drawing is a drawing where you start with your pen and you never once pick it up and you just keep drawing and keep going. Continual line drawing can be really fun. Doing random lines, practicing hatching, practicing contours. Dashes, slashes, stippling, hatching, circles, putting it all together and creating shapes and designs and ideas. So you're drawing an eye, you want some hatching. For the eyebrow, you want cross hatching. When you go to put it all together, maybe you stipple and you contour, okay? There's so many different ways to incorporate all the different fun designs and drawings. So as you draw, experiment with line weight, with pen pressure. Experiment with hatching, cross-hatching, contouring, stippling, random lines. Experiment, keep drawing, even if your pages look like nothing but patterns over and over and over again. Let me show you something. This is something I did in one of my sketchbooks. These are just patterns. That's all this is. Again, this is in pencil, but these are things that can be replicated, copied, experimented with pen and ink. Swirls, dashes, squares, triangles, plaids, different fabric textures, things that are concentric, shapes and designs. So I want you to practice these different techniques that I have showed you. Practice these a little bit every day, 5 minutes a day. Do it If you wake up in the morning and you stand at the counter and look out the window, have your sketchbook there. If you relax and read at night, put your sketchbook there. Build this into sort of habit blocking, habit chunking, building this into another habit where you practice 5 minutes every day builds confidence, builds skill, builds practice for bigger projects and illustrations. Okay, you ready to get to the tutorial? I am. For today's tutorial video, we are going to be drawing a rabbit together. Now I am going to link this photograph. It's high resolution, it's royalty free, in the description box below. So if you want to download it, save it, use it for other projects, or keep working on this one, you can. I'm going to show you a couple different ways to draw this rabbit, and because there's different styles and different formats within all these different drawing techniques that can be used. So I'm going to put up the rabbit here. You and I are going to look at this rabbit and we are going to figure out how to draw this rabbit. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to figure out shape. Now, if you don't feel comfortable putting pen directly to paper, feel free to pre-draw with a pencil, with something that you can remove if that makes you feel more comfortable. But what I do is I measure out. So here is ear to face to body. So maybe for this one, because this is a little bit more complex and you can't see the feet, we just start with face and we do ears, okay? So to me, the face is a little bit longer than the ears, a little bit. And what I notice about the face is the face shape. So the first style I'm going to do is a very sketched out style using ink. And for the shape, I see a little bit of a top, and then I see the angles it comes down. This is where the ears are going to connect. I see the eye shape. When I look at the eye, I see a straight line and a half circle. On the other side, I see a straight line and a half circle, okay? I see that the face shape arches, it arcs through midway of the eye. Now from here, I can draw some lines. These are sort of the side jowl here. And then this being the chin is going to kind of bump out, okay? This is sort of my loose face shape. Now the ears arch, and then straight line, and then come in. And again, this is a lot all at once. This isn't the easiest thing for beginners, but I think you can handle it because you've been practicing all the technique. So I arched, I straight lined, and then I curved back. Okay? Now, the nose, the top of the nose seems to hit right around the bottom of the eye. That's how I know, and it's directly in the center. So this is how I'm sketching out the nose, and it looks to me like a half circle and then two lines that come in. Now I see the line for the mouth comes straight down, and then it arches and goes down, arches and goes down. This is my basic bunny head shape from this illustration. All I'm looking at are the shapes. Are my ears perfect? No. Is anything ever perfect in life? No. I think it's more interesting this way. Bear with me. So when I look at the ear, I see a triangle from the inner ear and the outer ear. This is the outer portion of the ear. This is the inner ear. Again, I'm sorry, the sunlight of where I'm at is very wonky. For distinction, outer ear, inner ear. Now, there's also some differentiation between the color of the fur. So the fur has what I like to call ticking, It's ticked different colors. So I see black, I see different shades of brown, I see what looks like a mushroom sort of camel color, I see ivory. There are many different shades, but I am just doing monochromatic pen and ink illustration for this demo. So when you go to draw lines, wherever you start is the thickest and wherever you stop is the thinnest. So if you draw up, it goes up. If you draw down, it goes down. If you draw out, you are creating excellent whiskers. They start thicker, get thinner. This is another thing you want to practice. Going down, going up, going out, and it differentiates your line weight to help you out. Now, I see that this rabbit has a pupil. I'm laughing because I think this might be really hard. I don't know. You can do this. If I can do it, you can do it. I don't know. I see it like this. This is how I see the pupils. Sort of moons, if you will. Moons. But we can get to ticking fur. We can get to drawing. And I am just doing hatching for this one, okay? Where the fur is darkest, I will have more hatching. Where it is the lightest, because it looks like there's a little bit of really light fur around the eyes, I will have no hatching within these little lines right here. And I'm going both directions. Now it looks like there is some really pale fur here and something dark here and a little sort of chin here. And we're going to keep going with the hatching, okay? Don't give up. This is called the ugly phase. And you have to work through it. And you have to keep going. And you keep going till it looks the way you want it to look. And it looks, you're proud. You've dedicated the time to it. Again, I am 7 minutes into this. So this is a very sort of quick demo here for drawing a rabbit. Easter is coming. It is also Lunar New Year of the rabbit. So I thought this would be a fun idea. And then differentiate the nose with different widths and different lines of hatching. Okay? This is really dark, really close together, really thick hatch lines. These are going to act more like contour lines. A little bit of dots. And then here is more ticked fur. I am going to thicken up this line. I want these eyes to really stand out. So line weight helps add emphasis to areas you feel are the most important and should stand out. Okay. Again, this is sort of creative licensing. You decide what you think is most important. Now, he has fur, sort of hair, that comes off. And he has fun veins. So I'm just going to do squiggly lines. Think of veins of not just the body or animal body, but veins of a leaf. They can branch out, they can be wiggly. Emphasis. Where I place emphasis shows the viewer what I value and what's important. Now his eyes aren't white, so I am just doing hatched lines here because he has brown eyes. And his fur also sticks out. It doesn't stay within the confines of the space that we have drawn. His fur is fuzzy, it sticks out. Most animals have pretty fuzzy fur that stick out. And then the fun part, so from the ivory section, the lightest fur, there are whiskers. You start there, pull out, and the lines will get thinner and they'll look more like whiskers. You want them to overlap. You want them to look as natural as possible. There's also a little bit of whiskers around the eyes and eyelashes. So start in and pull outward. That is a 10-minute rabbit head. Want to do another style? Let's do another style. We can do a continuous line drawing of the rabbit. Now again, we know that the ears are almost the same weight. I am just looking at shape. This is a great exercise. Another great exercise you can do when drawing and practicing is draw with your non-dominant hand. Again, I'm not picking up the pencil, or the pen, I'm sorry, from the page. This is going to be continuous. And this can be done very quickly. You can see I'm doing it very slapdash, and you're getting the general ideas. Again, the nose is right around here. Such a cute bunny nose. Okay. This is just a fun way to practice looking at shape, at highlight, denoting the different shapes, what contours where, what doesn't. So is this still, these are the veins, is this still a rabbit? All right. That's another style. This is a 90-second rabbit head and ears. Now, if you want a completely different style, we can do that too. Let me get a new page. I've been filling this one up a little bit. All right, let's do a new page here. What we can do is we can practice our hatching and our cross hatching in different depths. So we will go, first we'll start with the ear. And this is how I see this shape. It's a little bit smoother, but this is how I see it. How you see it may be a little bit different. Everything is a combination of round and straight and arched. Again, come down here, and then we have the half circle big eyes. The half circle big eyes. Every time you draw it, it may be a little bit different. Here is the chin region. I know that the nose is from the bottom of the eye is where it starts. And it looks like a circle that goes into a point. And here is the sort of little nose shape here. Here is the line. Again, here's how I draw the face, sort of, okay? And this is just denoting the really light fur. This could be denoting the really light fur. Now, again, part of the outer ear overlaps the inner ear. And that is what I'm drawing with these shapes. So we can then crosshatch. It gets darker at the bottom, lighter at the top, farther apart. How you draw your lines, okay? Now for the eyes are the darkest. You can either color that in, or you can crosshatch really, really, really close together. crosshatch really close together. And then crosshatch farther apart for lighter portions. Now, again, the fur is ticked, it is colored for most of the portion of this rabbit. As you see, I am just drawing diagonal lines. Now I can hatch different areas, different thicknesses with my line weight, different spacing between the lines. This is all practice. This is what practicing looks like. And it's practice to progress, not practice to perfection. I don't know what perfection is. I have never seen it. It is not an insult or a slight. It is a realistic goal. So when you set a goal, if you see an illustrator creating something and you think, wow, that is my goal. I want to draw that well, or sort of that style, or have that ability or that speed. Remember that drawing is a sliding scale, and once you get there, you're going to be setting new goals. Your interests may change, your speed may change, depending on how much practice you give to something, okay? So be patient with yourself and be kind to yourself. How you would treat your best friend is how you should treat yourself, because you are with yourself for life. There is a different hatching on the nose. So we're very close hatching right around here. This just looks like different levels of shading to me. Now, I can go back to hatching the hairs if I want to. Again, start from the outer ear and come out, and the fur will look more realistic because it'll get thinner as you lift it off the page. Okay, and again, there are veins. Rabbits have amazing super ears. Okay, and we can do light hatching on the inside of the ear. This is another way to draw a rabbit. Okay, for the final way, maybe you're just interested in outlines in shape. So let's do one like that. So what we're going to do for this one is we're not going to color in. We're not going to do any hatching or cross hatching or contouring. All we're going to draw is the outline like we are drawing a page for a coloring book for someone else to color. And that is also a style and a choice. So again, with the ear, it arches, it comes down, it goes down at an angle, it comes back up, it gets thicker and then thinner and then connects, okay? We have this little tiny middle valley region that's super cute, and we come up and arch for the next ear that goes over, comes down, curves around, and connects. Now, I have never met an animal that is perfectly symmetrical, so do not be hard on yourself if things don't match. Come down for an angle, come down for an angle. Now we are going to do the eyes. We want to arch, come straight down, and arch. We want them to be symmetrical though. So arch, come straight down, and arch. And then within that, you will have the arching eyeball. This one is going to come down and curve. Come down and curve. It's going to go straight across. And then we were going to bump out for the cutest little chin ever. Okay. And then we get to get started on the nose. Remember, the top of the nose is sort of the bottom of the eye, and it's in the center. And it's like you want to draw a circle and then said, no, a point would be much more fun. And then from here is the nose and a line for the face, an arch down, an arch down. And I realized on this one I forgot whiskers. I forgot the whiskers. So I'm going to eyelash and whisker. Eyelash and whisker. All right. Okay, so here we have the silhouette. And I'm going to do a thinner line here. And this kind of comes across. I'm going to do a thinner line here that goes over. A thinner line here that goes over. And this is my rabbit. We need to do the ear shape, which is loosely a triangle. And again, loosely a triangle. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to thicken up the lines, and I'm going to alternate and add varying interest with line weight. So certain parts are going to be thicker, certain parts are going to be thinner. Make sure you don't move your hand over the wet ink and drag it around. And I am going to thicken up this line in certain portions. And what this does is it adds another interest to your illustration. Playing and experimenting with line weight and just getting to know the shapes. Living things have a lot of curves, and getting to know that. And just keeping it interesting, deciding where you want it thin, deciding where you want the lines thick. Does it matter? Maybe you want it thickest where it's darkest, where the ear sort of seems to be protruding from the head. Maybe you don't want any 90-degree angles and you want everything to be rounded. That is also a drawing stylistic choice. This is just a fun way, especially if you're drawing on a different style of paper like watercolor paper and you want to introduce mixed media, or you just want to get to know and get better at shape, identifying shapes. And it becomes really easy. Sometimes if you take your illustration and turn it upside down and grid it, and then from there you just draw what's in each individual square. And if you get comfortable doing and drawing that style, having paper that is grids or dot grid could be very helpful to you. That could be something that you enjoy. And again, I'm just softening some of these turns, just showing and denoting shape here for the viewer. Again, this is just a style. This may not be the style you're interested in, but this is something to understand when picking pictures. If you're drawing from life or you're drawing from photography that you are capturing, making sure that the background versus the foreground, what you're going to draw, is a completely different color, shade range, value range. You want it to be so contrasting that it's really easy to, in the beginning, to identify the shapes and get those shapes on paper. And then from there, if you decide you want to color pencil it or add an additional ink color to this, you then can, because you've denoted everything's within a proportion, the ear to the face. It's all within a proportion that's semi-accurate. Know the rules so you can break them. Maybe you just want some eyelash action. Again, I'm coming out from the tips and the bottoms of the eye. And then I'm going to do some whiskers from this white line here. And again, you want them to overlap. You want them to be different lengths. You want it to look realistic, if that is the drawing style you are going for. And rabbits have wild hairs everywhere. So these are a couple different ways you can illustrate and draw this rabbit. I hope this tutorial helps. If you have additional questions, feel free in the comment section, or if you want to keep it private, you can email me. Whichever way you feel comfortable contacting me and reaching out. There are so many ways to draw and to create. Just keep practicing. Keep practicing. Again, this one doesn't have whiskers or eyelashes. Okay. There's so many different ways to draw and create. I hope this helps. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.